What would you do if your parents looked you in the eye and told you that the money they promised for your future was going to your screw-up brother instead? Not borrowed, not temporarily redirected, gone. That's what happened to this guy. He spent 18 years being the invisible kid who held his entire family together while his older brother got the car, the cash, the attention, and the excuses. And when it finally came time for him to get his one thing, they yanked it away without blinking. So he did the only reasonable thing. He walked out, built his life from zero, and let the whole machine break down without him. This one hits different. My parents gave my trade school money to bail out my brother, so I left and let them figure it out themselves. This is a long one, but I've been holding it in for almost 2 years, and I need to get it off my chest. Some of this is going to sound exaggerated, but I promise every word is real. I'm 20 now, but this story starts when I was 18, and finally realized I was nothing to my family except free labor with a heartbeat. My name's Nate. I grew up outside of Atlanta, in one of those suburbs where every house has a 2-car garage and a lawn that looks like it belongs on a magazine cover. My dad, Greg, runs a mid-sized landscaping company. Does commercial properties, HOA contracts, the whole deal. Makes solid money from it. My mom, Linda, works as the office manager at a dental practice. Between the two of them, they pull in somewhere around 200 grand a year. Big house, nice neighborhood, 2 kids who couldn't have turned out more different if they tried. My older brother Brandon is 25 now. He's been the center of the universe in our family since the day he was born. First grandchild on both sides, star athlete in high school, the one everybody talked about at family events. Brandon played quarterback, dated the homecoming queen, had college scouts showing up to his games junior year. He was that guy, the golden boy, the one my parents built their entire identity around. Me? I was the other one. The quiet kid who showed up, did his work, kept his head down, and never caused a scene. Which in my family meant I was basically invisible. The favoritism wasn't even subtle. It was the kind of obvious that made other parents uncomfortable at school events. Brandon got a brand new Dodge Charger for his 16th birthday. Custom exhaust, tinted windows, the works. Probably cost close to 40 grand. I got a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a check engine light that had been on so long it was basically a feature. Brandon got $1,500 a month in spending money through all 6 years of his on and off college career. I worked at a tire shop after school and weekends just to cover gas and clothes and anything else I needed because my parents said earning my own money would build character. When Brandon wanted to go to Florida for spring break with his buddies, my dad handed him 3 grand without blinking. When I needed 400 for welding certification prep materials, my mom told me the family budget was tight that quarter. The budget was always tight when it came to me, never when it came to him. And here's the thing that really messed with my head growing up. I was the one actually keeping that house running. While Brandon was out partying and bouncing between majors and crashing his car twice before he turned 21, I was the one making sure things didn't fall apart at home. I handled the yard because Dad said a landscaper's son should know how to maintain his own property. I did the grocery runs because Mom was always too tired after work. I kept track of bills and due dates because both my parents are terrible with paperwork and deadlines. I helped Dad with invoicing and scheduling for his business on weekends because his office manager quit, and he never bothered to hire a replacement. I was essentially an unpaid employee in my own household from the age of 14. My parents justified all of it with the same line every time. Brandon's sensitive. He needs extra support. He's still finding himself. You're the responsible one, Nate. You don't need as much help because you've got a good head on your shoulders. They turned my competence into a punishment. Every time I handled something well, it became proof that I didn't need attention or resources. Every time Brandon failed at something, it became proof that he needed more of both. I kept a 3.9 GPA while working 25 hours a week. Nobody said a word. Brandon passed 2 classes in a semester, and my parents took him out to his favorite restaurant to celebrate his progress. I finished my welding vocational program at the technical high school and got certified before I even graduated. My parents didn't come to the ceremony. They were busy dealing with Brandon's latest crisis, which that particular week was a fender bender he got into because he was on his phone. I walked across that stage, shook the instructor's hand, and looked out at an audience full of other people's families cheering. My row was empty, but I kept telling myself it would be worth it. Because my parents had made me a promise. They told me that when I graduated high school, they'd help me pay for the advanced welding technology program at the technical college. 14-month program. Specialized certifications in TIG and pipe welding. The kind of credentials that get you $60 to $80 an hour on pipeline jobs and industrial contracts. The program cost about $12,000 total. My parents said they'd cover it as my graduation gift. They said it was the least they could do since I'd been such a help to the family. I believed them. That was my mistake. I'd been planning my entire future around that program. Already talked to the admissions office, picked my start date, mapped out my schedule so I could keep working part-time at the tire shop while going to school. I had a 5-year plan written out on a yellow legal pad that I kept in my nightstand. Graduate the program. Get hired on with an industrial contractor. Save for 2 years. Start my own mobile welding operation by 23. I looked at that legal pad every night before I went to sleep. It was the one thing that kept me going through all the nonsense at home. Then 3 weeks before my program was supposed to start, everything blew up. Brandon had gotten himself into the worst mess of his entire career of messes. He'd been working at some buddy's car detailing shop. And I'm using that term loosely because from what I could tell, his job mostly consisted of showing up late, leaving early, and posting videos of himself buffing hoods on social media. Anyway, he went out one night with some friends and got pulled over doing 60 in a 35. That alone would have been bad enough. But Brandon also had a suspended license from a previous incident that he'd never dealt with. On top of that, they found stuff in his car that I'm not even going to get into, but let's just say it wasn't vitamins. He was looking at multiple charges, mandatory court appearances, and the very real possibility of actual time. My parents went into full crisis mode. And by crisis mode, I mean they treated it exactly like every other Brandon situation. Total emotional mobilization. Mom took days off work to go to court with him. Dad canceled client jobs to meet with attorneys. They hired a criminal defense lawyer who charged $8,000 just as a retainer. Then there were bail costs, fines, mandatory program fees. All told, they were looking at somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000 to dig Brandon out of this hole. I watched all of this unfold from the sidelines for about a week before the other shoe dropped. I came home from the tire shop on a Wednesday evening. Tired, grease under my nails, ready to take a shower and go over my enrollment paperwork one more time. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table with a look on his face that I can only describe as a man who knows he's about to do something wrong and is trying to figure out how to make it sound reasonable. He told me they needed to talk about the trade school money. My whole body went cold before he even said the next sentence. I already knew. Some part of me had known since the moment Brandon got arrested. I just didn't want to believe they'd actually do it. They needed the money for Brandon's legal fees. All of it. The $12,000 they'd set aside for my program was being redirected to pay for lawyers and fines and whatever else it took to keep their golden boy out of a cell. Dad sat there and explained it like he was delivering reasonable news. Like this was a tough but necessary family decision that I should understand and accept. He said Brandon's situation was urgent and time-sensitive. He said my program could wait a semester while they got things sorted out. He said they'd make it up to me once Brandon's situation was resolved. I asked him one question. How long? He couldn't answer. Started talking in circles about how these things take time and how the legal process is unpredictable and how once Brandon gets back on his feet, they'll reassess the family finances. Which told me everything I needed to know. There was no timeline. There was no plan to replace the money. There was just Brandon. Again. And me getting pushed to the back of the line. Again. Mom walked in during the conversation and immediately tried to smooth things over. She put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Sweetie, I know this is disappointing, but your brother could go to jail. We have to help him. You understand that, right? Family has to come first. Family has to come first." I'd been hearing that line my whole life, but it only ever went in one direction. Hold on. For those listening, this is me jumping in, not the OP. I need everyone to sit with what just happened. This kid spent 4 years being his family's unpaid intern, personal assistant, and emotional punching bag. And the one time he needed something back, they said, "Nah, your brother's more important. That's not a family. That's a subscription service. And Nate just found out he's been on the free tier this whole time." Meanwhile, Brandon is out here collecting felonies like Infinity Stones, except instead of wiping out half the universe, he's just wiping out his parents' savings account. And they're funding it, willingly, with Nate's money. What happens next is why I love this channel. I looked at both of them sitting there, and for the first time in 18 years, I didn't feel sad about it. I didn't feel that familiar ache of wanting their approval and not getting it. I felt something new. I felt done. I told them I understood. Said it was fine. Went to my room and closed the door. And then I started making plans. Over the next 10 days, I operated like nothing had changed. Went to school, worked my shifts, did the grocery shopping, helped Dad with his invoices on Saturday morning, smiled at dinner, answered questions about my day, played the role of the good, quiet, responsible son they'd always needed me to be. But behind the scenes, I was methodically taking my life apart piece by piece and rebuilding it somewhere they couldn't reach. First, I called my buddy Jake. We'd been friends since freshman year, and his family had always treated me like one of their own. His mom used to joke that she had 3 sons. Jake had mentioned months ago that his uncle had a small apartment over his garage that he rented out cheap. I called the uncle directly, told him my situation. He said he could do $450 a month, utilities included, and I could move in whenever I was ready. Done. Then I called my boss at the tire shop, a guy named Doug. Doug had been more of a father figure to me than my actual father ever was. He'd been telling me for months that he wanted to bring me on full-time after graduation. When I told him I needed to accelerate that timeline, he didn't ask a lot of questions. Just said, "I'll get you to 40 hours starting next week, and we'll figure out a path to get you that welding program on your own terms." Third, I went to the technical college and explained my situation to the financial aid office. Turns out there were payment plans, workforce development grants, and employer-sponsored options that I'd never explored because I'd been counting on my parents' money. The admissions advisor spent an hour with me mapping out alternatives. I could defer my start date by 1 semester, apply for a state workforce grant that covered 70% of tuition, and pay the rest in monthly installments. It would take longer than I'd planned, but it was completely doable without a single dollar from my parents. The morning I left, I woke up at 5:30. Saturday. Parents still asleep. Brandon was who knows where, probably out somewhere creating the next crisis. I'd been moving things out gradually all week. Clothes in trash bags stashed in my trunk. Important documents in a folder under my seat. My welding gear, my tools, my laptop, everything that mattered was already at Jake's uncle's place. I stood in my room for a minute, looking at the empty shelves and the bare walls. 18 years in this room, and I could fit everything that mattered into the back of a Civic. That says something. The trophies from welding competitions, the certificates from vocational training, the one photo I had of me and Doug at the tire shop after he gave me a raise. That was my whole life in 3 trash bags and a cardboard box. I grabbed the yellow legal pad, looked at my 5-year plan, and realized I needed to update it. The timeline was different now, but the destination was the same. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Short, no drama. I moved out. Don't worry about me. I have a place to stay and a plan. The trade school money situation made it clear where I stand in this family, and I'm done pretending it's something it's not. I hope Brandon's legal stuff works out. I hope things get better for everyone. But I won't be here to watch it happen or to fix it when it doesn't. Take care. Then I drove away in my cracked windshield Honda with everything I owned in the back seat. Sun barely coming up over the trees. Neighborhood dead quiet. I looked at the house in my rearview mirror one time and then I didn't look back again. Pause for a second. Can we appreciate the surgical precision of this exit? Most guys would have had a screaming match at the table, thrown a chair, sent a 10-page text at 2 in the morning. Not this dude. He smiled at dinner for 10 days straight while quietly dismantling his presence in that house like a Navy SEAL extracting from a hostile zone. Lined up an apartment, locked down full-time hours, found financial aid, moved his stuff out in stages, and left a note so calm it probably gave his parents chills. That's not revenge. That's project management with a grudge. The yellow legal pad? My guy had a business plan at 18. Brandon had a mugshot. The first few weeks on my own were hard in the way that real life is hard. Not dramatic. Just long days and tight budgets and learning how to cook rice without burning it and figuring out that you actually have to buy your own toilet paper because it doesn't just appear under the bathroom sink. I remember standing in a grocery store my first week, staring at the price of laundry detergent and doing math in my head to figure out if I could afford the name brand or had to go generic. Went generic. Still do honestly. But even the hard parts felt different than the hard parts at home. Because at home, hard meant doing everything for everyone and getting nothing back. On my own, hard meant building something that was actually mine. Every grocery run was for my fridge. Every bill I paid was for my apartment. Every hour I worked was going into my future, not Brandon's latest catastrophe. Nobody telling me to pick up their dry cleaning. Nobody rating my future to fund someone else's mistakes. Just me in a garage apartment eating budget spaghetti and feeling more at peace than I ever had in my parents' 5-bedroom house. Side note, I burned the spaghetti the first 3 times. Turns out you're supposed to actually stir it. Who knew? Doug at the tire shop was incredible. Bumped me to full-time immediately and started giving me side work on weekends, doing basic welding repairs for his fleet of shop vehicles. Paid me cash on top of my regular wages. He also connected me with a buddy of his who ran a fabrication shop and needed part-time help. Between the tire shop, the side welding gigs, and watching every dollar like it owed me money, I'd saved enough for a deposit on the welding program within 3 months. Enrolled for the winter semester. I started the program 5 months later than originally planned, but I started it with my own money, and nobody could take it away from me. The day I walked into that welding lab for the first time, I looked around at the equipment, the booths, the instructors, and I thought about that kitchen table conversation where my dad told me my future could wait. Nah, it couldn't, and it didn't. Meanwhile, the news from home was coming in through Jake, whose mom stayed plugged into the neighborhood network. And I'm going to be honest, what I heard gave me a level of satisfaction that I'm not totally proud of. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel it. Okay, stop. I need everyone to understand what's about to happen. Nate was the load-bearing wall of this entire family, and they just removed him to build an extension for Brandon's legal defense. If you know anything about houses or families, you know what happens next. The whole structure starts sagging. And it's not even dramatic. It's just slow. Cracks in the ceiling. Doors that don't close right anymore. One day, you're refinancing the house and your wife is working weekends at a clothing store and you're wondering how you went from $200,000 a year to maxed out credit cards. That's what's coming. Popcorn ready. The first cracks showed up within weeks. Without me there to handle the day-to-day operations, my parents' lives started falling apart in ways they didn't even see coming. Dad's landscaping business took the first hit. I'd been doing his scheduling, invoicing, and client follow-ups for years. Without me, he started double booking crews, missing deadlines, forgetting to send quotes. He lost 3 HOA contracts in the first 2 months because he kept showing up on the wrong days or not showing up at all. Mom's situation got messy too. She'd been leaning on me to help organize her personal schedule around her work schedule, tracking appointments, reminders, even laying out her outfits for important meetings because she said it helped her manage her anxiety. Without her personal assistant/son, she started dropping balls everywhere. Showed up to work in mismatched shoes one day. That actually happened. Jake's mom told me, and I almost felt bad for laughing. Almost. But the real show was Brandon. With me gone, there was nobody to absorb the chaos. Nobody to clean up after him or buffer his messes. His legal situation dragged on for months and cost even more than they'd expected. The lawyer fees alone ended up being over $15,000. On top of that, he got mandatory community service, a suspended license for 18 months, and required classes that cost money. My parents covered all of it, obviously, because that's what they do. They sold Dad's base boat first, then Mom's good car, downgraded to an older model that was about as glamorous as my Honda, which honestly gave me a dark little chuckle. Then Brandon lost his detailing shop job because of course he did. The owner found out about the legal situation and let him go. So now he was living at home rent-free, eating their food, driving Dad's work truck when he needed to get somewhere even though his license was suspended, contributing absolutely nothing. My parents had always had me there to offset Brandon's drain on the household. I was the one who picked up slack, saved money, handled responsibilities that freed up their time and energy to deal with him. Without that balance, the math stopped working. 2 full adults supporting 1 adult-sized child with no income and escalating legal costs. Within 6 months of me leaving, they refinanced the house. Within 9 months, Mom picked up a second job working weekends at a clothing store. Dad started taking on extra jobs himself, working 6 and 7-day weeks just to stay afloat. Their social life disappeared. They stopped going to neighborhood cookouts and HOA events. And that's the part that really twisted things for them. The community finding out. See, our neighborhood was tight. People talked. Parents compared kids. And for years, my mom and dad had enjoyed the reputation of having the family that had it all together. Greg's landscaping business was everywhere. Linda was always put together and professional. And their sons, well, Brandon was the charming star, and I was the quiet achiever. Good family, good kids, the whole picture. But when I disappeared and people started asking questions, the story fell apart fast. My teachers at the high school knew something was off. Doug didn't hide his opinion of how my parents handled things. Jake's family was openly supportive of me, which told their whole social circle exactly whose side the reasonable people were on. The gossip spread the way it does in neighborhoods like that. Quietly at first. Whispers at block parties and sidelong glances at the grocery store. Then louder. Did you hear their younger son moved out the week he turned 18? Apparently they took his college money and gave it to the other one. The responsible kid left, and now they can't even keep their lawn mowed. The irony of a landscaper's house looking rough was not lost on anyone. Jake's mom told me that at the neighborhood 4th of July cookout that summer, somebody actually asked my dad directly where I was. He apparently mumbled something about me being busy with work and changed the subject. But the woman who asked already knew the truth, because her daughter went to school with me, and I'd told a few close friends the real story before I left. Dad started losing bids to competitors. Not because his work was bad, but because people didn't want to give money to a guy who treated his own kid like a second-class citizen. One of his biggest clients, an HOA that represented over 60 properties, switched to a different company after the board president heard the story from her son, who was on my welding team. Mom lost a couple of referral sources at the dental office when patients who knew our family decided they'd rather go elsewhere. In a business built on trust and relationships, reputation matters. And theirs was circling the drain. Wait. The irony here is so thick you could spread it on toast. Greg, a landscaper, built his entire livelihood on making things look good from the outside. And his own house is falling apart because the one kid who actually maintained it got tired of being treated like the help. If Karma was a screenwriter, this would win an Oscar. Meanwhile, Brandon is out here living rent-free, jobless, license suspended, eating their groceries, and somehow still not the one getting told to figure it out. It's like watching someone play The Sims and deliberately making every bad decision to see what happens. Spoiler. What happens is, you sell the base boat. The call started about 2 months after I left. First, just Mom. Casual-sounding voicemails. Hey, sweetie, just checking in. Want to make sure you're doing okay? Call me back when you get a chance. I didn't call back. Then they got longer. More desperate. Your father and I really miss you. The house isn't the same without you. We'd love to have you over for dinner. Still didn't respond. Then Dad started calling. His voicemails were shorter but heavier. Son, I know we messed up. Call me. 6 words that were supposed to undo 18 years of being second place. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I knew exactly what would happen if I went back. I'd walk through that door, and within 48 hours, I'd be doing dishes, running invoices, fixing Brandon's problems, and hearing about how the family budget was tight right when I needed something. The cycle would restart. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. The real collapse came about a year after I left. Brandon managed to violate his probation. I don't know the exact details because by that point I'd stopped keeping track. But from what Jake told me, it involved missing mandatory check-ins and failing a required test and some kind of altercation at a gas station that got the police involved again. This time the judge wasn't lenient. He was looking at actual time, not years, but months. Real consequences for the first time in his charmed little life. My parents panicked, hired another lawyer, spent another chunk of money they didn't have. Dad had to borrow against the landscaping business. Mom maxed out a credit card. They threw everything they had left at keeping Brandon out of trouble, and it still only partially worked. He got a reduced sentence, but the damage to the family finances was catastrophic. The house went up for sale 8 months ago. I drove past it once on my way to a job. There was a for sale sign in the yard, and the landscaping looked terrible. I won't lie, that image stuck with me. Not in a sad way, in a this is what happens way. They sold the house at a loss and moved into a two-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Dad's business shrank to just him and one crew because he couldn't afford to keep employees. Mom was still working two jobs. Brandon moved back in with them after his situation resolved and was doing exactly what he'd always done. Nothing. Sitting in their apartment, eating their food, watching their TV, contributing zero while they ground themselves into dust trying to keep him afloat. Final update. Last month I got the call. I was in my apartment after a 12-hour shift at the fabrication shop where I'd been working since finishing my welding program. Tired, but the good kind of tired. The kind that comes from doing work that matters and getting paid well for it. I'd finished my program 6 months earlier, got hired on immediately at $62 an hour doing pipeline work, and was already saving for my own mobile welding rig. My 5-year plan from the legal pad? Ahead of schedule. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Picked up because sometimes job sites call from random lines. It was Dad. He sounded old. Not just tired. Old. Like the last 2 years had aged him a decade. His voice had this raspy quality I didn't recognize. Like a man who'd been yelling into a void and finally lost the energy to keep going. He told me everything. The house being sold. The business shrinking to basically a one-man operation with a single truck. Mom working herself into the ground between two jobs and coming home so tired she falls asleep on the couch before dinner. Brandon being Brandon. Still living with them, still not pulling his weight, still costing money they don't have. The debt piling up. The fact that he and Mom had been fighting constantly, blaming each other for how things turned out, and seriously talking about separating after 27 years. Then he said the thing I'd been waiting 2 years to hear. We were wrong about everything. We gave your brother every chance in the world, and he wasted all of it. We gave you nothing, and you built everything on your own. We had it completely backwards, and by the time we figured it out, you were gone and everything fell apart. I should have paid for your program. I should have told Brandon to figure out his own problems. I should have treated you like you mattered, because you did. You were the only one who actually held this family together, and we didn't see it until you were gone. Mom got on the phone, crying before she even said a word. She told me she was proud of me, that she'd been telling people about my welding career and my certifications and how I'd built my life from nothing. She said she brags about me to everyone at work, but feels like a fraud because she didn't help me get there. I sat there on my couch in my apartment, the one I pay for with money I earned doing work I trained for with credentials I got on my own. And I let them finish talking. When they were done, I told them what I'd been thinking for 2 years. I told them I appreciated the apology, that I could tell it was real. But I also told them I wasn't coming back to be their fix-it person, that I wasn't going to manage Dad's invoices or organize Mom's schedule or bail out Brandon. That ship sailed the morning I drove away with everything I owned in a Honda Civic. I told them I was open to having a relationship, but it would be on my terms. I would visit when I wanted to, not when they needed something. I wouldn't give money or time to Brandon's problems. And if I ever felt like I was being used again, I'd be gone for good, and they wouldn't get a third chance. Dad said he understood. Mom said, of course. Anything you want. I also told them that Brandon needed to get a real job and start paying his own way, or this whole cycle was going to repeat until it buried them. Dad got quiet and said they'd been having that conversation. I told him having the conversation wasn't enough. Following through was the part they'd never been good at. He said, I know. And for once, I believed he actually did. That was a month ago. I've seen them twice since then. Once for dinner at a restaurant, neutral territory. Awkward, but not hostile. Dad asked about my work and actually listened when I talked about pipe welding techniques, instead of changing the subject. Mom didn't bring up Brandon once the entire meal. Small progress, but progress. The second time was last weekend. Dad came to see a project I'd been working on, a custom gate for a ranch property outside the city. He stood there looking at my welds, and I could see something in his face that I'd never seen directed at me before. Not just pride, regret. The kind that comes from realizing you had something valuable right in front of you, and you spent years looking past it, at something shiny that turned out to be worthless. He didn't say much, just put his hand on my shoulder and stood there for a minute. Then he said, "You did all of this yourself." I said, "Yeah, I did. That's where things stand. I'm 20 years old with a career, my own place, money in the bank, and a 5-year plan that's running ahead of schedule. My parents are broke, exhausted, and just now learning lessons they should have figured out when I was 10. Brandon is still Brandon, but apparently he started working at a warehouse last week, which is the longest he's held a job in years. Whether that sticks is their problem, not mine. I don't hate my family. I really don't. But I also don't owe them anything. They had 18 years to treat me like I mattered, and they chose not to. I had 2 years on my own, and I built something better than anything they ever gave me. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is stop being useful to people who only value you for what you provide. So Reddit. If your family treated you like the backup plan your whole life, would you have stuck around or would you have done what I did? Edit. A lot of people are asking about the 5-year plan on the yellow legal pad. Yeah, I still have it. It's taped to the wall above my desk in my apartment. Updated it a few times, but the bones are the same. Also, Doug from the tire shop came to my welding program graduation. Front row. Took pictures and everything. That man showed up for me when my own parents wouldn't. Every guy needs a Doug in his life. Look, I'm not going to pretend this is a happy ending with a bow on it. His parents are barely keeping it together. Brandon just started his first real job at 25, and Nate's still figuring out what kind of relationship he even wants with these people. But at 20 years old, this dude has a career paying $62 an hour, a 5-year plan running ahead of schedule, and the kind of self-respect you can't buy with a Dodge Charger and a monthly allowance. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just quietly became independent. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done? If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and fix that.